The courtroom was silent except for the slow ticking of the wall clock. The old man sat there in his wrinkled uniform, his posture straight despite the years that weighed on him. His hands rested on his knees, trembling slightly not from fear, but from age. The bailiff had just read the charges: impersonating a decorated war veteran, stolen valor. The words echoed in the room like a shot fired into an empty canyon. The young prosecutor stood tall, confident, almost smug. "Your Honor," he began. This man was seen wearing military decorations that do not belong to him: the Silver Star, a Distinguished Service Cross, and several campaign ribbons. We have no record of his service. He glanced toward the defense table, expecting the old man to break down to confess, but the veteran didn't move. His eyes, pale and tired, stared straight ahead. The judge adjusted his glasses and looked at the old man. "Sir, you have the right to speak. Do you wish to say anything in your defense?" The veteran slowly stood up. His movements were deliberate, disciplined. "Your Honor," he said softly, his voice gravelly but steady, "I've already said everything to the officers when they took me. Those medals aren't stolen, they were earned." The courtroom murmured. A few people chuckled quietly in disbelief. A man in the back whispered, "He's just another faker." The judge rapped his gavel for silence. "Order in the court." The veteran reached into his coat pocket and carefully pulled out a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. "This is my record," he said. The prosecutor frowned. "Your Honor, we've already checked the military database. There's no record of this man under that name." The judge took the paper and unfolded it. His eyes skimmed over the faded ink army letterhead, commendation notes, service dates from decades ago. Then his eyes froze, his lips parted slightly, and his hand trembled just enough to make the paper rustle. The courtroom watched in silence as the judge slowly looked up. "Corporal Henry J. Walker, 2nd Battalion, 75th Rangers," he whispered. The room seemed to stop breathing. The prosecutor blinked, confused. "Your Honor, is there a problem?" The judge's eyes didn't leave the old man. "Problem," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "I served in the same division during Kannar Province, 1968. We lost most of our men there." The veteran nodded slowly. "Yes, sir, I remember. You were Lieutenant Rhodes." The judge froze completely. His gavel slipped from his hand and clattered on the floor. The young prosecutor's confidence melted into shock. The old man continued, "We were pinned down on Hill 49. You were leading 2nd Platoon. I carried you out after the ambush." The courtroom gasped. The judge swallowed hard, his eyes glistening. "That can't be," he whispered. But then he saw it, the photograph attached to the file, worn and creased, showing a group of soldiers in muddy fatigues, arms around each other, dust and smoke in the background. There he was, Lieutenant Rhodes, and next to him, a young corporal, barely 20, with the same tired blue eyes as the man standing before him now. The silence stretched for what felt like forever. Finally, the judge spoke, his voice low. "This case is dismissed." Immediately, the prosecutor started to protest. "Your Honor, we have procedure. Enough." The judge snapped, slamming his gavel down. "This man is no imposter. He's a hero. He earned every medal on his chest." The bailiff stepped forward to remove the cuffs from the veteran's wrists, but the judge stopped him. "No, I'll do it." The judge stood, took the keys himself, and with trembling hands unlocked the handcuffs. The old man's wrists bore the marks of the metal, red and raw. The judge bowed his head. "I'm sorry, soldier," he said quietly. The veteran simply replied, "You don't have to be, sir. Just don't let them forget." The judge nodded, his voice thick with emotion. "I won't." The room was silent as the veteran picked up his faded hat and turned to leave. But before he reached the door, the judge called out, "Wait." The old man turned slightly. The judge straightened his robe and saluted, a perfect, formal salute, the kind given to a superior, not an equal. The veteran stood tall, tears welling in his eyes, and returned the salute. The courtroom, filled moments ago with whispers and doubt, now stood in reverent silence. Even the prosecutor, lowered his head in shame. The judge spoke again, his voice breaking. "Let the record show that Corporal Henry J. Walker is an honored combat veteran of the United States Army, and let it also show that we, this court, this country, owe him more than an apology." The old man nodded once, then left quietly, the sound of his boots echoing down the marble hallway. Outside, sunlight spilled across the courthouse steps. For the first time in years, the old veteran felt seen not as a burden, not as a relic of the past, but as a man who gave everything and asked for nothing. As he disappeared into the crowd, the judge remained standing, still staring at the door where the old soldier had walked out. He whispered under his breath, "Welcome home, Corporal." And though no one else heard it, the words hung in the air like a prayer long overdue. They said he was a liar, a fraud wearing medals he didn't earn, a man too old to know when to stop pretending. They dragged him out of a small diner on Main Street, his tattered uniform still crisp enough to draw stares. He didn't resist. He just asked quietly if he could keep his cap on. When they brought him into court, everyone saw just another forgotten old man clinging to memories that weren't his. The prosecutor stood with his file, confident and sharp. "Your Honor." He began. The defendant was arrested for impersonating a decorated war veteran. He was seen wearing a silver star, a Purple Heart, and campaign ribbons from Vietnam, but our search found no record of service under his name, Robert Dean. The old man didn't flinch. He sat there, his eyes steady, hands clasped in his lap. His uniform, though faded, bore the weight of stories no one believed. The judge, an older man himself, looked over his glasses. "Mr. Dean," he said, "do you wish to speak?" The veteran rose slowly, every movement deliberate, the posture of someone who still remembered discipline even when the world forgot him. "Yes, sir," he said quietly. "I served, I bled, and I buried friends under that flag, those medals. They aren't stolen, they were earned." A whisper spread through the courtroom, a quiet ripple of disbelief. Someone snickered. The prosecutor smirked and tapped his file. "Your Honor," he claims to have served in the 5th Infantry, but the records were destroyed in the fire of 1973. "We couldn't verify anything," the judge sighed. "Mr. Dean, do you have any proof? Documents, witnesses, anything?" The old man hesitated, then reached into his coat pocket. His hand shook slightly as he pulled out a small, weathered envelope. "It's all I have left," he said. The bailiff took it and handed it to the judge. Inside was a letter, faded ink, military letterhead, an official signature barely legible. The judge read it silently, then paused. His eyes widened just slightly, his lips parting as he whispered the words written there: "Silver Star, awarded for gallantry in action during the Battle of Kisan, 1968. The courtroom went still. The prosecutor blinked, confused. "Your Honor?" he asked. The judge didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the signature at the bottom. It was one he recognized. Slowly he looked up. "Who gave you this medal, Mr. Dean?" The veteran lifted his head. "Colonel Thomas J. Everett, sir, my commanding officer." The judge swallowed hard. "Thomas Everett was my commanding officer too," he said softly. "I was there, 101st Airborne." The room froze. Even the air seemed to stop moving. The judge stood slowly, his voice shaking now, not with anger, but with something deeper. "You were in Delta Company?" "Yes, sir," the old man said, his voice breaking for the first time. "We lost so many that day. I pulled Everett out after the mortars hit. He didn't make it." The judge's face went pale. "I remember hearing about that. They said the man who carried Everett out disappeared before he could be identified." The veteran smiled faintly, a sad, tired smile. "Guess I've always been good at disappearing, sir." The silence that followed was so heavy that the clock on the wall sounded like thunder. Then, slowly, the judge removed his glasses and set them on the bench. "This case is dismissed," he said firmly. The prosecutor started to object. "But Your Honor, enough." The judge barked, slamming his gavel down. "This man is no imposter. He is a decorated soldier, a survivor, and a hero. You will show him the respect he deserves." The bailiff moved to remove the handcuffs, but the judge waved him off. "No, I'll do it myself." He stepped down from the bench, something no one in that courtroom had ever seen him do. His hands trembled as he unlocked the cuffs from the veteran's wrists. "Forgive us," he said quietly. "We should have known better." The old man shook his head. "You did what you had to, sir. I just wish my brothers were here to see this." The judge stood back, eyes glistening. "They are, soldier, in every breath you take." The room was silent as the veteran picked up his cap and turned to leave. Before he reached the door, the judge called out, "Wait." The old man turned, and the judge straightened to full attention, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Sergeant Robert Dean," he said, "for your courage, your sacrifice, and your honor, this court salutes you." The old man froze. Slowly, he raised his trembling hand to his forehead and returned the salute. It was not a gesture of pride, but of closure. The prosecutor stood silently, guilt etched into his face. The gallery rose to their feet, not out of order, but out of respect. The veteran gave one last nod, then walked through the double doors, the light from outside washing over him like dawn after a long night. Outside, the world moved as it always did. Cars passed, people hurried, life went on, but for that old soldier, something had changed. For years he had carried the weight of silence, the burden of being forgotten. Now, for the first time, someone had remembered. Inside the courtroom, the judge sat back down, staring at the empty chair where the veteran had sat. His voice, barely above a whisper, trembled as he said, "Welcome home, soldier." And in that single line, decades of distance, doubt, and injustice were washed away. The medals on that old man's chest no longer looked like metal. They looked like memory, sacrifice, and the living proof that honor never fades, even when the world forgets who earned it.